Hey, welcome to the Strong Roots podcast. My name is Kristin Hill, and we are so excited that you're tuning in today. Our prayer is that you would move one step closer to Jesus through this series. So go ahead and check out this next episode. Welcome back to the Strong Roots podcast. I'm here with Pastor John, my husband, and we are in the season all talking about what matters most. And you are one of my favorite people, obviously. The most favoriteest person in my life.
Best friend.
But honestly, this isn't biased. You are somebody who lives on mission. I feel like I learned how to live for what matters most through Jesus in you. So I am very excited to interview you today and for you to share everything that you live by and that I've learned from you today. So, John, let's just start out with, if you were to articulate what matters most to you now in your life, in light of what used to matter most to you, maybe before you followed Jesus, what's the difference?
I think, I've always been a future-oriented person. I've always thought about living to get to what we want later. That's always just part of the way that God's wired me. But I think that when I chose to follow Jesus, I started, instead of living for just my 80th birthday party and what I wanted to see and have there, I started living for eternity. And I think that's a pretty big shift, to recognize like this is not all there is. So, yeah.
For people who are like, all right, my 80th birthday party, like, I just hope I have lots of friends and family there who love me. Like, that's not a bad goal, but what is the best goal when you say 80th birthday party?
I just think people don't actually think about what it takes to get there. Because when you say, hey, I want to have lots of friends and family that love me, there's so many things that are required to achieve that end that are necessary. Like, for example, I think that most matriarchs and patriarchs should be financially successful. And I know that sounds bad, but the Bible talks about leaving an inheritance for your children and grandchildren being a really godly thing. And I also think it's a relational thing. Not that, money is everything, but I think it's a way to draw people together with a source of stability and help for family members. Like, that's something that you need. And if you want to have a family that's close together, you need to provide that foundation for them. Having close relationships requires you to stay married later in marriage, and when I see people like get divorced after 30 years of marriage and everything else, it's so interesting to think like that's going to change things. You're just not going to have the end of life that you want, and the cost is really high. Like, if you think that is going to leave your relationship with your children and grandchildren relatively unaffected, you're just profoundly wrong. I think choosing kindness to your children, parenting for the future rather than parenting for friendship in the moment is really important. Like, if I want to have a relationship with lots of family around me when I'm 80, I know that I have to raise children who are generally going to be responsible and successful. Like, otherwise, our relationship is going to be dysfunctional and enmeshed, and, rather than like supporting them in a way that's healthy, I'll be sustaining them in a way that is unfortunate and dysfunctional. So there's so many different things that have to go into place to have what you just described is an 80th birthday party where everyone's around me. And I don't think that's a bad thing to think about, but actually getting a little bit more granular about what it takes to get to that end is super, super important. And I don't think a lot of people actually think about that when they're thinking about what matters most in the decisions that we make.
So what habits do you have in your own life that help you to live for what matters most? And what habits are you trying to instill in our kids to live for what matters most?
I want them to be really good decision makers. And one of the things I think is really important when raising kids is helping your kids make choices without your input.
Right.
And I want to really train them. I love telling my kids, you decide. I love asking my kids, Charles Stanley says, what would you do if I wasn't here, right? Yeah. To his kids. That's a question that he always said to them. And I think that is so wise with our kids. I think that's really important. And another thing I want to train people to do, I want to train myself to do, is really work to visualize the long-term outcome of the candidate desires in your life. And here's what I mean by that. Like, if I have a different desire that I want, think about what that different desire is before you embrace it. Hey, so I'm about to say something here that's really shocking to some people, and I recognize that it is, but I'm saying it because I think it's going to address a core sinful desire that a lot of men have, just like a lot of women want to be in like two guys dueling over you relationship. But I didn't want this soundbite that's about to happen to be put into one deal without a disclaimer in front of it, because I don't want to be taken out of context. But it'll be good. Don't quit listening. If it's shocking, it's going to be good. I'm going to bring it around. And like, for example, this sounds really bad, but like one of the things that I desire to do is to live a life of debauchery, right? Like I want to go buy a mega yacht, you know, leave all of my principles and have a harem of women that I can go and use whenever I want. Like that's a non-Christian carnal desire that I have. Mm-hmm. And what's really helpful for me is like to actually visualize how that would make me feel. You know what I mean? If I'm sitting on a 200-foot mega yacht in the Caribbean, and I have like a harem of women that I could go and do. Like even you know, if I wasn't a Christian, I want to do that. That would be profoundly unsatisfying. Right. Like the life that I have with you and with our kids is far greater than that. I just think about the emptiness that, you know, friends that I have that are far from God that have made basically choices like that. Like that life stinks. Like it's just like relationally unfulfilling. It's lonely. There's not a depth of connection that you and I have. Like there's just no way that I want that. And every time like I think about sin, or I think about something that might not be sinful but isn't like totally godly or doesn't have great character, it's pretty easy just for me to zoom out and see where that's going to lead and think like, I don't want that. So I don't need to fantasize over that anymore, you know? And that's just really helpful for me. It's been really helpful to really play that out, you know, when in so many different contexts, you know, whether it's, you know, we talked before about how we like confess if we feel an attraction to someone, you know, besides each other, whatever else. But one of the ways I always like have dealt with even like a flickering thought is like, wait, I actually factually don't want that. Like I don't want that. That's not a part of what matters most. What matters most. And I think that's really, I think you found that, you know, we do this all the time, whether it's buying a car, you know, we deserve this, you know, we can afford it, we can do whatever. But then it's like, hey, like, the additional amount that I want to spend in this car, you know, let's say I want to, like, you want me to get a car that's $5,000. I want to get a car that's $10,000 because I'm sick of, you know, trolling around town. This is an argument we're currently having. But what is that extra $5,000 going to appreciate into? Like, how many doublings is that going to have before, let's say, we're 65? Well, that $5,000 is probably going to have a 10x or a 20x. You know, it's probably going to turn into 50 or 100 grand. And, like, is the inconvenience of, you know, getting a new engine or doing this other thing worth $100,000 to me? You know, and all of a sudden, like zooming out and putting it in that frame of reference is really helpful for us to choose what matters most. And, you know, it's so interesting to me because I think people are generally better at talking about finances in this way. Yes. You know, because we can talk about, you know, appreciation financially. But when it comes to what matters most, like this is something that happens in every arena of our life. Like there is compound interest relationally, spiritually, intellectually. Like I remember when my dad had me, you know, I got a B- in algebra in 8th grade, which is, you know, for my family, just the worst thing that could ever happen. It's unacceptable. It was embarrassing. And my parents were like, you are retaking algebra. And part of it was because they wanted me to do it right and they wanted me to learn that, you know, a B- is not acceptable. But part of it was they said, hey, math compounds. And if you think you're going to do good in geometry with a cracked foundation in algebra, right? And that's just so many different areas of life. There are no shortcuts for your integrity, for your character, for like, I think that quitting something, if you committed to finish something, if you committed to anything and you quit before you finish that commitment, there's a compound to your character. There's a compound loss to your character that I think is really important. And teaching our children follow through, teaching ourselves follow through, I think is really important for arriving at that 80th birthday. I'm blabbering on, but does that make sense?
Yes. So something that I feel like, okay, they know, I felt like you articulated what doesn't matter most, like the harem of women, the mega yacht, like spending the extra, like for us, spending the extra money sometimes. But I feel like something we haven't hit is what actually matters most for the people who are like, okay, I hear you, but what are we actually living for, in your opinion?
I mean, for me, overwhelmingly eternity. And, you know, in my arena, you know, obviously I work in a church and I don't know what you do or what you believe, but I think there's overwhelming evidence that there is a God and that the God of the Bible is that God, that Jesus is the only way, the only truth, the only life. And I I think if you look at the evidence, if you look at the data, not people's opinions, not listen to your heart and be happy, not what a progressive movement might say, but if you actually look at evidence, it's like living for Christ and his kingdom is all that matters. Like it is actually all that matters. And we have a pretty fortunate life, but if you actually get granular about the choices we make and the amount that we live on and the things that we have, like we don't actually have that much. And yet our life is like super, super fulfilling because we're storing up treasure in heaven.
Right.
And I think that brings great joy. I think it matters most. I think it's profoundly satisfying. And I think that like God is so good and that, like a lot of late nights, like counseling people and whatever else, but seeing how God has rescued people from a life of misery and debauchery. And when I talk about debauchery, like I know it, like, that's sex, drugs, alcohol, party, wild living. That's what I mean when I use that word. But when I talk about that, like, I don't think that's a bad thing because the Bible says it's a bad thing. Like, I think it's a bad thing because of the incredible, profound, generational human misery that leads to.
Right.
And when I say generational, I mean, like people who live the party Tinder life, swipe right, like it's super unsatisfying for them, but it's also like almost guarantees a level of dissatisfaction for the children and the destruction that life brings upon, children that are born in those situations. Like it's hard, it's really hard. And if you're in that situation, I'm not trying to condemn you. I know you already know that. You've already discovered that. And when you think about, man, like Christ has a plan for us that leads to a high level of satisfaction in eternity, but also now, like, that's really good for me. Like, I love that. That matters most. That's what I want to invest my life in. And every time we have a story, which we have lots, like almost weekly, we have stories of, God using our personal lives outside of the church to intersect with and transform and rescue people from a life of dissatisfaction and debauchery. It's like, man, that's super fulfilling. There's nothing more I want to do. Like, that's what I want to do with my life. There's no amount of money, there's no amount of anything else that I would find more satisfying. And another, can I say another thing? So another thing for me, I think all the time, I would have made a great businessman. Like I think, man, I could have started a business and I could have kicked butt and I could have made $1 squillion and da-da-da-da-da and be really fun. And, it'd be fun if I could have made like I think about $1 billion. That would have been a goal. Like I want to make $1 billion and do this and I want to really be able to throw this around. And I just think like that's good and some people are called to that. But I love what I'm doing so much more. And again, it's just like the mega yacht fantasy. Like, I don't think that would be satisfying or as satisfying as what we're doing, which is living for Christ and his kingdom with everything we had. And, if it was my goal to make $1 squillion and give it away or use it for Christ and his kingdom, which some people do, maybe that would be good. But the idea of building a business in and of itself is like this thing I've always wanted that I don't think would be that satisfying. So.
Right. Okay. So I think you hit it great, but where would someone listening start? So here you're saying all these things, like, it's awesome. I mean, I'm married to you. I'm living on this adventure with you.
You're living the dream because you're married to me. What a lucky, blessed woman. Oh my goodness.
But for real though, like maybe someone is listening and they're like maybe a little overwhelmed. Like, wow, I want to be there, but I can't even be there for a while. Where would you challenge them to start living for what matters most?
Oh, it's little things. You know what I mean? Like what everybody thinks is I have to make all these big changes, but like our life is just a bunch of tiny, small choices daily that have compounded over a long period of time. I mean, that's that whole compounded thing. You know what I mean? Like losing weight starts with healthy living. There's no miracle diet. There's no like pill. There's no whatever. It's just like healthy, holistic, godly living is a series of small choices made every day. And it's a battle. And do I choose like the wrong thing multiple times a day? And not necessarily the sinful thing, but the wrong choice, the choice that doesn't lead to the life that I want multiple times a day? Yes. You know what I mean? Like, yes, all the time. But it's a matter of saying, I'm not going to get down about whatever that thing was that I didn't want to do. And like in this moment, I have another opportunity to choose a path that's going to lead to the life that I want. And I'm going to do that. You know what I mean? Like that's it. Like, and if you're watching and you're like, man, how can I like start small? And like I'm going to forgive my child. I'm not going to lose my temper at them. And I'm going to like not do 2 hours of screen time tonight.
Right.
You know what I mean? Instead, I might listen to a podcast, increase my knowledge, do a workout, and send some encouraging text messages out to people. You know what I mean? Like, how hard is that? And how much more satisfying would that be than, watching, I don't know what people watch these days, The Walking Dead. Tiger Dragon. What is that? Tiger King?
Tiger King.
Is that something people watch? I don't know. Anyway, look, guys, I don't have TV, so I don't have Netflix. I don't have that stuff.
But that is a small decision that we made.
Yeah.
To have a life that's more intentional. That's just, I feel like what you're saying is do something small, but that will change the outcome of your life in the future. And I love that.
If you did that every day, like if you made a decision to reallocate the time you spend watching screens to like leveling up intellectually, spiritually, and relationally, and you made the decision to do that for 1 month, like 1 month of, I'm just gonna eschew this one area of my life. I think for most of us, it's not like, yeah, you would feel a lot better. Like there would be a big like, oh yeah, that matters most. That would be a big change,
Right. And so I want to leave you with this challenge. Start with 5 minutes. Whatever you feel tugging on your heart, like I want to do something to go and live for what matters most. Start with 5 minutes a day and see how it adds up. But thank you, Pastor John, for sharing your wisdom and insight with us. I'm excited to see how this transforms lives. And thank you guys for listening in, and I cannot wait to catch you next time. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us on our other social media platforms. We don't want you to miss out on any future content. Thank you so much again, guys. I hope you have a great day. And I want you to know I am personally praying that your roots stay strong.